The mountain air cut through Sarah's jacket like ice daggers as she stood at the edge of the cliff, watching the storm clouds gather on the horizon. Her long brown hair whipped around her face, and she pushed it back with trembling fingers that had nothing to do with the cold. Behind her, she could hear Marcus adjusting his climbing gear, the metallic clinks of carabiners, and the soft rustle of rope creating a rhythm that had once brought her comfort. Now, each sound felt like another nail in the coffin of their relationship. "Sarah, we need to move," Marcus called over the growing wind. His voice carried that familiar note of authority, the same tone he used when discussing quarterly reports or negotiating contracts. Even here, thousands of feet above the valley floor, he couldn't stop being the CEO who commanded boardrooms and controlled outcomes. The weather's turning faster than the forecast predicted. She turned to face him, taking in the sight of the man she had loved for 3 years. Marcus Wellington stood 6 feet tall, with perfectly styled black hair that somehow never seemed out of place, even in mountain winds. His expensive outdoor gear fit him like it was tailored, which it probably was. Everything about Marcus was calculated, measured, controlled. Even his proposal last month had been delivered with PowerPoint slides and a cost-benefit analysis of marriage. "I know," she replied, but her feet remained planted on the rocky outcrop. Something inside her rebelled against following his lead once again. "Just give me a minute." Marcus checked his watch, a gesture so automatic she wondered if he even realized he was doing it. "We don't have a minute. Look at those clouds. If we don't start the descent now, we'll be caught in the storm." Sarah looked out over the vast wilderness stretching below them. The valley was a patchwork of green forests and silver streams, dotted with tiny specks that might have been houses or barns. From this height, the world looked peaceful, manageable, unlike the chaos in her heart. She thought about the conversation they'd had that morning, the one that had started this whole expedition. "Why can't we just elope?" she had asked over breakfast at the mountain lodge. "Just the two of us, somewhere simple." Marcus had looked up from his phone, where he was already reviewing emails despite being on vacation. "Because my family expects a proper wedding. The Wellingtons have been married in the same church for 4 generations. My mother would never forgive us. But what about what I want?" Sarah had pressed. "What about what would make us happy?" "This is what makes sense," Marcus had replied, as if happiness was another variable in his business equations. "We've already put down deposits on the venue and the caterer. Everything's arranged. Everything's arranged." Those words had followed her up the mountain all day, echoing in her mind with each step. When had her life become something that was simply arranged rather than lived? The wind picked up, and Sarah felt Marcus's hand on her arm. His touch was firm, but not gentle, guiding rather than caressing. "Come on," he said. "We really need to go." She allowed him to lead her away from the edge, but as they began their descent down the rocky trail, her mind wandered to another touch, another time. 3 months ago, she had been working late at the community center where she volunteered, helping to organize supplies for families affected by the spring floods. Jake Morrison had been there too, the local search and rescue coordinator who had somehow ended up stacking boxes of donated clothes alongside her. Jake's hands had been rough from outdoor work, scarred from years of rescuing stranded hikers and lost children. When he had accidentally brushed against her while reaching for a box, the contact had sent electricity through her entire body. More importantly, when she had stumbled under the weight of a particularly heavy container, Jake had caught her arm with a gentleness that spoke of genuine care rather than efficient problem-solving. "Careful there," Jake had said, and his smile had reached his eyes in a way that Marcus's never quite did. "These donations aren't worth you getting hurt." Sarah shook her head, trying to dislodge the memory. She was engaged to Marcus. She had said yes to his methodical proposal because it made sense. They moved in the same social circles, had compatible career goals, and looked good together in photographs. Her parents approved of him. Her friends envied her. On paper, Marcus Wellington was everything a woman should want. The trail grew steeper, and loose rocks skittered away under their boots. Marcus moved with the confidence of someone who had conquered mountains before, each step deliberate and sure. He had climbed extensively in Europe and South America, always with professional guides and top-of-the-line equipment. Climbing, like everything else in Marcus's life, was something to be mastered and checked off a list. "Watch your footing here," he called back to her, not bothering to turn around. "The rocks are loose." Sarah gritted her teeth. She had been hiking and climbing since she was a child, long before she met Marcus. Her father had taken her on weekend camping trips throughout her childhood, teaching her to read weather patterns and navigate by the stars. She didn't need Marcus to tell her about loose rocks, but pointing that out would only lead to another argument about her being unnecessarily defensive. The storm clouds were moving faster now, dark and heavy with the promise of rain. Thunder rumbled in the distance, still far enough away to be more warning than threat. Marcus increased his pace, and Sarah found herself hurrying to keep up, her hiking boots slipping occasionally on the uneven terrain. As they rounded a bend in the trail, Sarah's phone buzzed with an incoming text message. She paused to check it, partly out of habit and partly to catch her breath. The message was from her sister Emma, asking about the final head count for the engagement party next weekend. Sarah stared at the words on the screen, feeling the weight of all the arrangements and expectations pressing down on her like the approaching storm. "Sarah." Marcus's voice was sharp with impatience. "What are you doing? We don't have time for phone calls." "It's just a text," she called back, but she tucked the phone away without responding. The engagement party was another one of Marcus's productions, carefully orchestrated to impress his business associates and society contacts. Sarah's role in the event seemed to be limited to wearing the right dress and smiling at the appropriate moments. The wind was picking up now, carrying with it the scent of rain and the promise of lightning. Marcus was right about the weather, Sarah had to admit. They needed to get off the exposed ridge and find shelter. But as she followed him down the narrow trail, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was running from more than just a storm. They had been hiking for another 20 minutes when the first raindrops began to fall. Large, cold drops that splashed against the rocks and turned the dust into slippery mud. Marcus cursed under his breath and picked up the pace even more, but the trail was becoming treacherous. Sarah's boots lost traction on a wet rock, and she stumbled, catching herself with her hands as she slid several feet down the steep slope. "Are you hurt?" Marcus asked, but he didn't move to help her up. He stood above her on the trail, checking his GPS device and calculating distances to potential shelter. "I'm fine," Sarah said, pushing herself back to her feet. Her palms were scraped, and her knee throbbed where it had hit the rocks, but nothing was seriously damaged except maybe her pride. As she brushed the dirt from her pants, she found herself thinking again about Jake Morrison. He would have been beside her in an instant, checking for injuries with gentle hands and concerned eyes. He would have cared more about her well-being than about the efficiency of their descent. The rain was coming down harder now, turning from scattered drops to a steady drizzle that promised to become a downpour. Marcus was studying his map with the intensity of a general planning a military campaign. "There's a cave system about half a mile ahead," he announced. "If we can reach it before the lightning starts, we should be safe to wait out the worst of the storm." Sarah nodded and fell in a step behind him once again. The cave sounded like salvation, but she wasn't sure what they would say to each other once they were trapped together in the small space. Their conversations had become increasingly strained over the past few weeks, ever since she had started asking questions about their future that didn't have easy answers. "Do you ever think about what we'd be like if we were just normal people?" she had asked him the night before they left for this trip. They had been at another charity gala, surrounded by the glittering elite of the city's social scene. Sarah had watched Marcus work the room with practiced efficiency, making connections and closing deals even at a fundraising dinner. "What do you mean, normal?" Marcus had replied without taking his eyes